Ever get that feeling like maybe what we learned about the Bible, way back when, um, wasn't the whole picture?
Yeah.
Today we're diving into the Pentateuch, those first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, and oh boy, it's about to get seriously interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating how these texts just keep challenging assumptions, even about like their own origins. We're talking about power dynamics, all these different viewpoints, all shaping what millions consider sacred.
Absolutely. We're dissecting a scholarly article titled, Can the Documentary Hypothesis Be Rehabilitated? And let me tell you, it throws a real curveball at that traditional idea of, Moses just sitting down and writing everything.
Right, right. You've probably heard of the documentary hypothesis, the idea that different authors, they're labeled J, E, P, D, and H, each wrote different parts of the Pentateuch, like puzzle pieces assembled over centuries.
Yeah, like those alphabet blocks we used to play with as kids, except these spell out ancient laws and like epic tales. But our source material says, wait a minute, what if it wasn't a centuries-long game of telephone?
Exactly. What if instead of one after the other, these different parts were written, get this, simultaneously, by different groups, all collaborating? Imagine a sort of like biblical writer's room, except, in ancient Alexandria.
A biblical writer's room. Okay, now that's an image. So who are these writers huddled over scrolls, and what were they even trying to accomplish?
Well, the article suggests this whole alleged collaboration was, get this, commissioned by none other than Ptolemy II, Philadelphus.
Wait, seriously?
Yes, that Ptolemy, the pharaoh, obsessed with building the Library of Alexandria. Picture this. It's the 3rd century BCE. Alexandria is this incredible melting pot of cultures and scholarship. And Ptolemy, he wants the Jewish holy books for his collection.
Okay, so he wants the books, but something tells me getting everyone to agree on what those books should actually say wasn't exactly straightforward, was it?
You can say that again. This was likely a time of like intense debate and negotiation within the Jewish community itself. You've got priests, elders, folks from Judea, maybe even some Samaritans in the mix, all with their own agendas, their own interpretations of their history, their laws. Imagine the tension in that room, everyone vying to make sure their perspective is the one that gets, codified in this mega text for the Library of Alexandria.
So we're not just talking about who wrote what, but like whose version of history, whose laws, whose God even, made it into the final draft. That's huge.
It really is. And it makes you wonder, right? If the Bible is more of a compromise text, a product of all this debate and collaboration, does it make it, I don't know, more meaningful, less divinely inspired?
Those are some seriously big questions. And to even begin to unpack them, we need to understand who these alleged authors were, what they represented. So let's rewind to those labels, J, E, P, D, and H. And remember, we're not talking about individuals here, but like groups representing different, I guess you could say, factions within Judaism at the time. Let's start with J, the Yahwist, the storyteller, the one who gives us those incredibly vivid pictures of creation, the flood, the patriarchs.
And importantly, the one who favors using the name Yahweh for God, hence the nickname, right? Think of lyrical language, a real focus on the covenant, that special agreement between God and the Israelites and, of course, the promised land. This is likely a group with very strong ties to Judea, wanting to preserve those traditions.
Okay, so we've got J, our storyteller, with a Judean perspective. But every good story needs, another side. Who's up next in this ancient writing room of ours?
Next up, we have E, the Elohist, who, you guessed it, preferred the term Elohim for God.
Hmm.
Now, remember how Jay had that very Judean vibe? Well, E likely represents a more, shall we say, Northern Kingdom perspective, bringing their own set of stories and traditions to the table, with a particular focus on figures like Moses and Joshua.
Ooh, I can already see the potential for some creative differences. 2 different regions, 2 different origin stories. Were they literally going line by line? My God's better. No, mine is.
Yeah, perhaps not literally, but you're getting the idea. If J and E were writing simultaneously, imagine the negotiations. Which stories make the cut? Whose laws get, codified? It wasn't just about writing down the past. It was about shaping the future of their faith. And this is where it gets even more fascinating as we introduce the other players.
We're back, listeners, exploring this wild idea of the Pentateuch as, like, this collaborative project, potentially commissioned by Ptolemy II himself, for the Library of Alexandria, no less.
And we've just met J and E, our Yahwist and Elohist, remember? Bringing their own, regional traditions to the table. But hold on tight, folks, because there are more voices in this alleged writer's room.
More voices, more potential for, I'm guessing, even more creative differences. All right, who's next up in our lineup of biblical collaborators?
Next, we have P, often called the priestly source.
Hmm.
Now, if you're picturing those long, detailed passages about rituals, genealogies, the instructions for the tabernacle, that's likely our P coming through. Think order, structure, making sure everything's done by the book, literally.
Right, because it's one thing to tell the sweeping story of creation and all that, but someone has to, like, lay down the law, right? What does this new theory say about P's role in all this? Were they just, like, adding on to what J&E wrote, or was it more, complicated than that?
Oh, much more complicated. See, the article suggests P wasn't just, adding on. They were actively responding to, even critiquing the work of Janie, especially when it came to, like, priestly matters. For example, you'll notice in the P sections of Genesis, the patriarchs, they don't offer sacrifices. They don't even use the name Yahweh. It's as if P is saying, hold on now, those rituals, that specific name for God, those are reserved for a later time revealed to Moses.
So it's like P's the studio's legal team, making sure everything's by the book, or at least by, their book. But they're not the only ones with strong opinions. What about Deuteronomist? They always felt a bit different to me, more like a powerful speech than ancient history.
Exactly. D is fascinating because they bring this more, you could say, political, almost like statesman-like perspective. Their writing, which is largely found in the book of Deuteronomy, it reads less like ancient history and more like, a legal document, with these long speeches and laws that honestly feel almost modern in their concern for social justice and things like that.
Right, like that whole love your neighbor as yourself thing, very D. But how does this theory, this whole simultaneous authorship idea, change how we see D interacting with, the others?
Well, while D draws heavily on those narratives from J&E, there's very little of P in there. It's as if D is deliberately, I don't know, sidelining some of those priestly concerns, focusing instead on a more direct relationship between the Israelites and God.
Okay, so we've got some definite creative differences brewing in our biblical writers' room here. J and E are hashing out their regional differences. P is all about law and order, and D is bringing the social justice. It's getting crowded in there. Where does H, the holiness code, fit into all of this?
Ah, yes. HH is interesting because they kind of combine elements of P's priestly concerns with D's emphasis on, ethical behavior. They seem particularly concerned with this idea of Israel as a holy people, set apart by, their ethics and their relationship with God. And their writings, primarily found in the book of Leviticus, really reflect that.
So H is like the peacemaker, trying to find some common ground between the like legalistic P and the more idealistic D. But if everyone is writing at the same time, simultaneously, who gets the final say? Whose version of the story ends up on Ptolemy's bookshelves?
Ah, that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And unfortunately, our source doesn't give us a definitive answer to that. But it does offer some clues. You see, the very fact that the Pentateuch, as we have it, includes these different voices, these contradictions, these varying perspectives, it tells us that no single faction had complete control.
So maybe Ptolemy wasn't looking for one single unified voice. Maybe he wanted a text that reflected the, I don't know, the diversity of thought within Judaism at the time. Or maybe, and I'm just, spitballing here, maybe this was a deliberate strategy on the part of the Jewish community in Alexandria. Yeah. Well, imagine you're a minority group trying to, like, establish yourselves in a new land under a new ruler, a powerful one at that. You've been tasked with presenting your sacred texts, your laws, your history. What better way to ensure, unity and acceptance than to present a text that incorporates, even celebrates, your own internal diversity?
Now, that's an intriguing thought, a way of saying, look, we might have our differences, but ultimately we're stronger together. A message for Ptolemy, for sure, but also a way of preserving their own internal identities, their own traditions.
Right, because who gets to decide what gets left out? Whose voice gets silenced? It's a lot easier to make the case for inclusion when you're building a library, not just, preserving a single scroll. But this also means that the act of creating the Bible, at least this early version of it, was incredibly, political.
Absolutely. And we haven't even touched on the implications this has for how we understand, say, the process of canonization, how these texts became the Bible as we know it.
And that's where we'll pick up next time, right here on The Deep Dive. Because this isn't just ancient history, folks. This is about how we understand power, faith, and the very idea of a sacred text.
Back again for another deep dive, everyone.
Still sifting through the origins of the Bible.
And yet, okay, things got a little, let's say, unorthodox last time.
Well, shaking up those old assumptions, it's really a calm and orderly business.
Especially when we're talking about a text as, impactful as the Bible.
Our little exploration of this simultaneous authorship theory, with those different groups potentially collaborating on the Pentateuch, it really makes you stop and think.
Mhm.
It's like we took that image of Moses up on the mountaintop and swapped it out for a busy writer's room with arguments over commas and maybe some ancient takeout containers lying around. But seriously, what are the lasting, implications of this whole theory? Does it, diminish the Bible's importance, or could it actually, I don't know, enhance it?
That's the core of it all, isn't it? And I'd say it's the latter. Think about it. If the Pentateuch really was this collaborative effort, this compromised text born out of, all these different viewpoints, it becomes a real testament to the power of dialogue, of finding that unity in the middle of all those
That's a
differences.
powerful thought. It makes the text feel, I don't know, more alive, more human,
Yeah.
knowing it wasn't just dictated from above, but wrestled with and shaped by, real people grappling with their faith and where they fit in the world.
Precisely. And it reminds us that those different voices, those different perspectives, they never really went away. Even today, these texts are being interpreted and reinterpreted in countless ways by different communities all over the world. The debate over authorship, it isn't just some academic exercise. It reflects this ongoing process of, engaging with these ancient texts and finding meaning in them, meaning for our own lives.
So where does that leave us? We started with this intriguing theory, this idea of like we said, a biblical writer's room in Ptolemy's Alexandria.
Hmm.
We met the alleged authors, J, E, P, D, and H. Not as individuals, remember, but as those representatives of different factions, each with their own, agendas, their own interpretations. We dove deep into the political and social context, the power dynamics, and realized that the creation of a sacred text, it's anything but straightforward.
It really isn't. I think the biggest takeaway here is just this. Don't be afraid to ask those questions. Challenge the assumptions. Even and maybe especially about things that are considered, sacred, untouchable. The Bible, even with all its complexity, all its contradictions, it's a testament to the enduring power of stories,
Hmm.
of law, of faith. And by really digging deeper, by engaging with all those different perspectives, we enrich our understanding, not just of the text itself, but of the human experience it's reflecting.
Beautifully said. It's a good reminder that learning, it's a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
There's always more to uncover, more to, explore. And that includes revisiting the things we thought we knew, but with fresh eyes, with an open mind.
Exactly. The search for understanding, it never really ends. And who knows, maybe someday there'll be new evidence, something that'll completely rewrite our understanding of the Bible's origins. Yet again, that's the beauty of scholarship, this constant quest for knowledge.
And hey, that's the beauty of the deep dive, too. We get to explore these fascinating nooks and crannies of history, these mind-bending theories, and hopefully walk away with more questions than answers. Until next time, keep asking those big questions and keep diving deep with us.